Welcome to the Leap Health Workplace podcast. Here we explore innovative, proven health and wellbeing solutions to drive your performance and productivity. Leap Health empowers individuals and organisations to prioritise their health and wellbeing as a catalyst to performance and productivity. We do this by providing workplace health and wellbeing performance workshops and also the Leap 360 one-to-one leadership coaching to drive health, wellbeing and performance, powered by the Game Changer Index Energy for Impact profiling tool. And we offer bespoke corporate programs to ignite proactivity in ownership at all levels of health and wellbeing as a catalyst to performance and productivity. Whether you're sat at your desk right now or on the move, get ready to listen, get ready to invest your time and take action straight after. I'm Anna Ready. Let's get ready to make small steps to leap health. I am so excited for today's podcast. I want you to imagine having a business podcast that has peaked at position 2 behind Stephen Bartlett. We have got the lady who co-hosts this podcast, Truth, Lies and Works, with us today, Leanne Elliott. So they're in the top 10 for business podcasts. They're the #1 work podcast in the UK. This lady knows her stuff. So if you are a leader now, an individual or anyone in an organisation that wants greater clarity to understand how you can really excel in 2025 and what are those key trends you need to be tapping into to be ahead of the game, or maybe actually you've started the year thinking we know exactly what we're doing because we invested loads of time in our planning, but you just haven't hit the ground running for some reason, today is definitely for you and you need to be listening up because Leanne is going to share some really, really valuable insights. So, who is Leanne Elliott? Well, as I said, she's the co-host of Truth, Lies and Works podcast, but she's also a chartered psychologist with a proven track record of building workplaces that empower teams and enable performance. So less of me talking about Leanne, and I'm just going to hand over to Leanne now. Leanne, tell us a bit more about who you are and how you've achieved such amazing things.
Hello, Anna. Thank you for having me. I'm not sure I need to add much to that beautiful introduction. I wish I could take you with me everywhere I went. I'm Leanne Elliott. I'm a chartered psychologist. My area of practice is the workplace. So how do we look at human behavior in the workplace, and how do we create environments where people thrive and businesses perform? Those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. We can have happy, healthy people and make money for our business. I primarily work with owner-led businesses, typically organizations 50 and under, that are experiencing rapid growth, that don't maybe have the internal capability just yet in terms of people and culture, and help them put in all those frameworks and systems and processes to create, again, this environment where people can thrive. Because the other thing that we know is when people are happy and healthy, they perform and businesses grow faster. So for entrepreneurs, they tend to get it. So that's why I love working with them. As you said as well, I co-host Truth, Lies and Work podcast with my husband, Al Elliott, who's also my business partner. And we talk about everything work related. Our tagline is we're here to help people simplify the science of work and create amazing workplace cultures. And that can be anything from talking to entrepreneurs who have built a really cool business, to psychologists, thought leaders, anybody really that has a strong story, a lesson to share. And as we like to link it back to actual science, the data. This isn't fluff. This is science.
I love that. This isn't fluff. No one wants fluff, do they? I think often we think in the business world it can be all the sales talk and a bit of fluff, but I've listened to this podcast, your podcast, quite a lot. I love it. And as you said, you've got that science behind it. You cut through that fluff and give really clear, actionable advice. And yeah, if anyone hasn't listened to it, I would really recommend, because it's really different the way you go about it. You have different sections that address things in different ways that I've never heard before on a podcast, but it keeps our audience attention and delivers value. But going back to that, you said that you want organisations to thrive and employees to be healthy and prioritise that well-being, which is just music to my ears, and exactly we're singing off the same hymn sheet, but it's all around that win-win environment, isn't it? And that's what we're going to be coming on to shortly within the conversation. How can we actually achieve that win-win environment? So, Leanne, with all your experience on the podcast and in the work that you've done, what key shifts have you observed in how leadership and well-being are being approached by organisations in recent years? Because there has been a huge shift, hasn't it, in the last few years?
There has been a shift and there continues to be a shift. And I think we've all got a bit of whiplash actually from how much of a shift we've seen. What's really cool, and I always try and be as positive as possible. What's really awesome is how these are now conversations about organizational life, health and well-being, and performance and leadership. And when I started out, um, that wasn't really the case. I was confined to HR consultancies, maybe the odd job in the public sector. In terms of entrepreneurial businesses, even corporate businesses to an extent, these weren't really the conversations happening beyond the very traditional transformational leadership type conversation, which is fine. But it was early days. And then it seems to be since I think about probably 2016, 17, we started to get a bit more conversation, particularly around well-being, mental health, and then boom, the pandemic happened 2020. And suddenly everybody realized, oh, mental health, we all have mental health. Oh yeah, because I don't feel great right now. And this is seriously impacting how I'm feeling about myself and how I can present myself to the world and get up in the morning and my relationships. And I think we all went through this very universal experience that impacted our mental health in a very significant way. And I think since that collective experience got business owners to sit up and go, right, yeah, I'm starting to get it. And then we had the whole hybrid work and remote and all that, that's still shaking out. So I think for the first time, business owners on scale got this idea that actually how we think and feel has a direct impact on our work performance and therefore the profit and success of our business. And since then, it's almost like there's been a swing the other way. It seems like employees had a lot of control. And, after the pandemic, especially the great resignation, was that kind of big moment, I think, for employees. And since then, we're starting to see a swing back. Organizations want to reclaim that power in terms of RTO mandates, in terms of leadership behaviors that we're seeing from certain tech leaders right now. So I think it's a turbulent time and there's lots to talk about. So it's a great time to have a podcast, Anna, isn't it?
Absolutely. And yeah, I think, it really is that turbulent time, isn't it? We've all kind of gone in one direction and then we're moving back a little bit, but we don't know how far to go. And so it is an exciting time, isn't it? We're starting to find, where's that optimal sweet spot in terms of employee well-being. But actually what you described around, people starting to recognise that there's a link between well-being and performance, it's just absolute common sense, isn't it? And it's just it is beyond me how it's taken us to, like you said, 2016 maybe, to start to recognise the link between the two. I know for years and years, and this was what my massive frustration was, that learning and development was always treated in isolation. Well, if someone's there feeling physically, mentally weak or struggling, that learning and development investment is going nowhere. So I think you're quite right. It's amazing that we are starting to recognise the link between well-being and performance. So thank you for that, update in terms of where we're up to in the journey in terms of well-being and performance. What do you see now happening in 2025? What do you think are going to be the key things that are happening in 2025?
Oh, 2025, man. I mean, we're only in February and already I think we've seen more examples of of a shift in leadership behaviors than I would have ever expected to see in such a short period of time. My concern with what we're seeing from the US in terms of Trump and Musk, what we're seeing from Europe as well in the UK is not an exception, is there are very radical leadership behaviors that are being normalized at a scale that I find unsettling in terms of those very coercive leadership, the bullying, type behaviors, it's very coercive in a way that we haven't seen in the workplace for, I'm not sure we've ever seen it in terms of a way that's being normalized and condoned. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that continues to develop over 2025. And I think we're going to see we're going to start to see a little bit of divide in terms of people that were subscribed to that type of leadership behavior and people that are going to very definitely push back against that leadership behavior. And for if anyone's not sure, push back against it, because coercion in leadership doesn't work for very long. You want that empathic, human-led, human-centered leadership is infinitely better and will infinitely be better for your business. With that, I think the other big thing of 2025, the other big theme is going to be around AI. And I know anyone who listens to podcasts is probably sick to the back teeth of hearing people talk about AI right now, but it is becoming part of our world. It's becoming part of our working life. And figuring out how to augment AI with the employee experience in a way that leverages the benefits of this emerging technology whilst ensuring that we're still providing our people with meaningful work and job security and the control of autonomy that they need, is going to be really important. With that as well, I think L&D is going to have a revival this year in terms of the skills that we need to develop across both of those, either in terms of AI and actually the skills that we need to redevelop in our people, either in terms of those more psychosocial skills, or the technical transactional skills that some of our workers are going to need in terms of using this technology, and leadership behavior as well. I think we're going to have a surge in leadership training this year, more from a position, I think, from organizations want to kind of put down, stamp, this is a leadership we subscribe to, this is what we approve of and advocate for as part of their employer brand. I think particularly, as Gen Z continue to come into our business, as millennials continue to go through these career shifts and transitions, leadership and culture is going to continue to be a key thing that people are looking for. And then I think the third thing I hope to see this year is, with this surge in terms of change and technology, is actually a swing also back to what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be, to create these environments in which humans thrive, and actually understanding that the pace of change and technology doesn't replace and will never replace what makes humans great and what makes workplaces great. And that's going to be things like, how do we build relationships? How do we create meaningful work? How do we articulate a vision that our people believe in and want to get out of bed every morning to contribute to? How do we find the right balance for our people in terms of flexible work? How do we make sure they've got the right resources? How do we help them switch off and build their resilience in a way that is sustainable? And I think that actually there's so much simplicity in that, and the simplicity of fundamental psychology and human behaviors. I think my hope is that particularly the entrepreneurs, because they're the people that typically tend to get this quicker because they can make change quicker and they can see it impact quicker. The entrepreneurs and business owners that get that and go back to those basics as a foundation for layering over this emerging technology and augmenting AI and the noise in the world, I think they're the organizations that are going to really thrive in 2025. There's going to be an element of this balance between how do we continue to innovate whilst actually bring it back to the basics that we haven't really got right so far anyway. Let's get that right and create that foundation that the growth will accelerate for the next 2 to 5 years.
Oh, interesting. So much advice and thoughts there to take on board. I'm going to try and unpick some of those and pick your brains a little bit more about some of those. You just mentioned that innovation and how we're going to get that human element and that innovation. And actually, unless people are, I don't know your thoughts on this, but unless they're unable to show that human element and be themselves, then we stifle that innovation, don't we? Because we don't create that psychological safe environment, I guess. And you mentioned before around us needing to be empathetic, and there's going to be those maybe two sides in organizations that believe they should, one side not believing that and one side that is. How do you think we can empower people to be their authentic self, to be able to voice in organizations, what they believe in?
It's really difficult to do that authentically, because there's also, particularly in commercial organizations, because there's always this commercial pressure as well. But I think there's really there's really three things that you can do as a business owner to create this environment where people are just going to buy into. And the more they buy into it and aligns with them, the more authentic they're going to be able to feel. I think the first thing is be really clear on what your reason is as a business. What's your mission? What are you trying to achieve for your customers, your clients? What influence are you trying to have on the world, whether that's driving change, innovation? It's about having purpose, not being for purpose, a for purpose business, but having a vision and something that people want to contribute to. And then as part of that reason, helping your people understand what their individual role is in that reason, that mission delivery. It's a very classic story, and we don't know if it's an urban myth, but you might have heard it. JFK, the president, went to visit NASA and was talking to a janitor. And he said to the janitor, "What do you do here?" And the janitor says, "I'm helping to put a man on the moon." And it is exactly that you might not have a direct influence or impact necessarily on the absolute mission delivery. But if you understand your role in everything you do and how that contributes, then that translates to meaningful work. That translates to purpose. And that means that I can turn up and as myself, my whole self, and push that forward. If we can layer that with very clear values, and I don't mean values on a wall, I don't mean 20 of them, core values, 3 is fine, plenty. But actually, how do those values translate into behavior that we want to see in the workplace? If we say that we are inclusive, what does that mean in terms of the behaviors that we won't tolerate? Because that's what defines culture. And that's my favorite definition of culture from a psychologist called John Amici. Culture is defined by the worst behaviors tolerated, which means that even if you've got overall a great culture and everyone's very happy, but you've got that little pocket of toxicity somewhere, that's what defines your culture. And I think it's that for you to hope for other people to show up authentically, you have to show up authentically. So if you have these values, make sure you're clear what behaviors are associated with them, what behaviors will not be tolerated, and how those behaviors will be shut down and dealt with within your business. Because that, again, is going to, as you said, that lovely word, psychological safety, is going to start to breed because people go, oh, they actually do what they say they're going to do. It's as simple as that. That's where authenticity starts. So I think they're the first two things. And then I think finally, it's going to be about training your managers. And I say this so much. If you do one thing as a small business, you can ignore everything else I've said so far. Just go and train your managers. Train them in psychosocial skills, how to communicate, how to influence, how to listen. Oh man, if you just put your managers through listening training, it'll have such a big impact. Because your managers are your superpower in your business, particularly as it grows, because they're your culture keepers. They're the people that can continue to police this environment and make sure that undesirable behaviors are shut down and create this environment where people feel safe. That, the definition of psychological safety, I feel safe to express my thoughts, my feelings, my views without fear of negative impact. And only really managers can create that environment sustainably. So I think really what's really simple about this and also really difficult is that nothing I've said so far costs any money beyond training your manager, but equally, I'm sure there's lots of effective free training out there just in terms of listening training. This doesn't cost any money. It doesn't have to be wildly innovative. And it's something that I guarantee you 80% of your competitors aren't doing in this formal, thought out, intentional way. And if we can do that, just that start, imagine it as an employee. I join an organization, I know exactly what they want to achieve and how it contributes to the world. And I know exactly my role in that mission delivery. And I know exactly who I need to go to share my ideas, share my concerns, help me manage my performance, my development, my sense of self. If I just have those 3 things, I'm going to feel pretty confident to turn up as my authentic self.
Leanne, you make it sound so simple. You make it sound so simple and logical, and yet it's not always happening, is it? But you make it, that was so clear. So I'm gonna say this back so that everyone's clear. Okay, we need a clear mission and a purpose, and everybody needs to be involved and excited about that purpose. Everyone needs to know their individual role. They need to be accountable. and you shared that lovely story about the chap at NASA. When we talk about values, it's not just lip surface with values. We're going to look into what behaviours will we not tolerate, what is not acceptable in our organisation, and you've got to walk the talk with that as well. And key opportunity is in terms of managers and empowering them to be able to help the people that work for them. And I heard you and Al chatting on one of your recent podcasts saying, one of the most powerful things is listening. And even if that manager says, right, you've come up with 3 things, there's 2 I can't do anything about, but there's 1 I can do something about, and I will try and do that. That person feels heard and understood. So thank you, Leanne. That was really, really clear. Thank you. This leads me on to a stat that I was going to include in our chat today, which again I heard on one of your recent podcasts with Rob Kowalski. Is that how we
Yeah, Kowalski, yeah.
I've pronounced it correctly. But he shared a stat from the States that states a toxic workplace culture is the 5th leading cause of death in the US. It's absolutely staggering, that figure, and really made me listen up when I heard that. That data was actually pre-pandemic. So what do you think is changing? How do you think, where do you think we're up to? Do you think it's higher? Do you think it's lower? I've got a game of higher or lower now. But where do you think we're up to now, Leanne?
Higher. Do you know what? I've not seen any research that actually measures that same thing again. Rob is so cool, by the way. For anyone listening, do look him up. He is a phenomenal speaker. Do you know what it is? It's what we know about stress is that it's really not good for us. It's really not good for us. It's not good for us psychologically, and it's really not good for us physically. And there is almost 100 years of research now that shows this. I think the biggest one was the Whitehall studies. Was that in the 50s or 60s that followed the civil servants? And stress means more cortisol in our blood, our stress hormone, and that means strokes. It means heart attacks. It means cognitive function difficulties. It causes a whole host of physical problems. Stress is really, really bad for us. Really, really bad for us. So we've known that for a very long time. And I think that stat came out at a point where the US especially was very concerned about the state of the nation's health. And I think it was only a couple of years after that the Attorney General kind of did a bit of a more of a call to action, re-emphasis of that. So what do we know post-pandemic? Well, I think anecdotally, we know it's not got better. Is anyone less stressed now than they were in 2019? I'm not sure. With the economy, with the geopolitical environment, with the divisions we're seeing, with the mass layoffs we've been seeing in the last 2 to 3 years, people are concerned about their job security. The rise of AI is people questioning their job security. So I think it's safe to say that stress is on the up. We know that the burnout figures are also through the roof over the last 12 months. So applying that to Rob's statistic there about it being one of the leading causes of death, I would imagine it is the same, if not higher. I mean, one of the things that we have learned about the pandemic, and what the pandemic brought social scientists a real opportunity with, is an environment where it was very extreme and we could test different things. So we gathered data before around working from home and dispersed teams, but we never had it on the scale that we had it before to really dig into what is happening, what the impact is from a sample side perspective. And I think there's a few things that we found about it is that on one hand, toxic leadership can be diluted when we're not in the room with them, but that doesn't mean it goes away, which is why I think we see a big preference for a lot of people want to remain working from home. I question sometimes whether it is actually they're happy working from home or they've just got that distance from a very toxic manager in their life that they're able to put in literally more physical boundaries between them and that boss. And on the flip side, I also wonder whether that's why some managers would want their employees back in to be able to, enforce that control. The other tricky thing about work from home as well is what we're finding is that it can cause more stress in some scenarios because there is a more blurred boundary between work and life. So it's much harder for us to switch off. It's much harder for us to go, I'm going to finish work at 5:30, and then I've got my 45-minute commute, and then I walk through the door. I'm no one longer Leanne the psychologist, I'm Leanne the wife. I don't have that distinction anymore. So that line is blurred. And if we lose that rest and recovery time, then we know that that impacts our stress levels and our resilience levels. And that always on mentality isn't going to do us any good. So, on one hand, remote work gives us that flexibility, which can be brilliant, especially for caregivers, for example. On the other hand, it's much harder for us to switch off. So, I think post pandemic, what we're going to see more and more of is how people will try to figure out a work scenario that is personalized to them in terms of how they split their time, where they're working, who they're working for. And as I said before, that earlier point, what does the leadership look like where I work? And of course, there is an element of privilege in that. And not everyone's going to have the opportunity or choice, or, the market isn't going to allow that for people to move jobs just on those ethical and moral decisions alone. But it's certainly going to factor into it, because I think what we absolutely and again know is that from that universal experience of COVID, how our mental health significantly impacts everything that we do and the relationships that we have. And in terms of relationships, I'm sure you've heard of the Harvard study that's been going for 80 years now. The one thing that it consistently finds year on year, decade after decade, is that relationships are the single biggest predictor of our health, our happiness, our success, and our lifespan. Good relationships will literally mean we live longer. So again, taking it back to Rob's quote, bad bosses, toxic cultures, more stress, shorter life. And there's only so long that this information is going to be out in the public sphere and talked about in a way and on a level, a profile that hasn't been talked about before, and people just continue to accept that that's the way it is. Because especially post-pandemic, there's a lot more of us that aren't willing to sacrifice that much of ourselves and our health to deliver outcomes for somebody who doesn't treat us very well. I just think that whole period has not got much of a lifespan left.
And that's really great to hear, isn't it? Because we've got more and more people who are embracing that well-being. I think one of the reasons that it can't continue with toxic workplaces is because we've seen workplaces that do succeed and that can link that mental and physical well-being to the performance as well. So thank you, loads and loads of that food for thought there, that, are people better working from home just because they're away from that toxic environment? I have to talk about positive and negative noise, getting that balance. Is it because you're away from that negative noise? And it's finding that individual solution, isn't it? I guess you're saying when different people have different reasons why they might want to be working hybrid, different responsibilities. But going back to that connection as well, different people will value connection in different ways, won't they? And so I guess the solution is got to be really, really individualized.
We do, and with that connection as well, just to add on it, there's no research that shows us that, all these return to office mandates and the reasons that leaders are using, it's better for collaboration, it's better for innovation, it's better for ideation. Show me the data, because I've not seen any data that proves that to be the case. In fact, there's lots of studies that show actually if you encourage individual ideation, people generate, brainstorming themselves, then bringing that to a collective, whether it be in person or digitally, you actually get more unique ideas than a group brainstorming, because you get group think. And if you haven't got the psychological safety, you might be afraid to offer an idea, through fear of being shamed or ridiculed for it. Show me the data that exists. And actually, particularly for people who are typically 40 to 45 and under, we've been very used to using technology to build intimacy, to build relationships. And again, the pandemic accelerated that. How many of us are on Zoom with our nan? I never thought that would happen, every other day. So I think that's what push that I want to see. And I'm hoping that social media will help with this to an extent if we can get rid of the misinformation is, if leaders are saying, oh, we have to go back to the office because it's better for building relationships, it's better for collaboration, it's better for ideation. Show me the data, prove it. Show me that that is the case. And I will go back to the office because ultimately that'd be better for my well-being. That'd be better for my success, my performance, my career prospects. But until I have that, until I see that, if I'm experiencing that I can do all those things remotely and meet up with people, as and when more, less frequently, then why should I change, to my detriment, my working life? And I understand there'll be people screaming it at the phone or however they're listening to this, going, yeah, but people, it's their business and they pay their salary and they have the right to expect them to do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, okay, yeah, fine. But that's the power struggle that we've been in for the past 50, 60 years to our detriment. And stress is getting worse and burnout is getting higher and productivity is going down and employee engagement is going down. So yeah, we can continue to do the wrong thing because out of principle, or we can lean into these entrepreneurs, these really great change makers who go, do you know what? Why is work the same as it was 100 years ago when it was invented by Henry Ford? Why are we still doing that? Because everything else has accelerated and changed. Why are we so stuck on this 9 to 5 idea? Go to one place, go to the office. It just seems so archaic to me that it doesn't make sense to me. And I don't have any data for it. So that's very much, sorry, rant there, Anna. But opinion without data is really irritating to me.
I love it, and I love that passion behind it. You're right, you've got to have the data to prove it. And as you said, the last few years have been a massive opportunity to get that data, huge opportunity, and it's still not there. So yeah, love that passion and that giving us those words of wisdom, and going, right back to the words of wisdom you gave us, 5-10 minutes ago, around what can you do in organizations. I guess having people with a clear purpose, with a clear understanding of where they fit into the organization, being able to talk, have that psychological safety, means that employees can trust them to make their own decisions about whether they're best in the office or out of the office. So it's that underlying trust, and those foundations are critical, aren't they, to success.
Yes, and that's the thing, isn't it? Like if you don't trust your people, why did you hire them in the first place? Why do you want someone who you don't trust working in your business, working with your customers?
Yeah.
It's not even logical. It makes no sense.
Absolutely. So we've spoken then about, around that link between performance and mental and physical well-being. What can you add to that in terms of how can we get that balance and that synergy between the two, and how can we actually get data around it as well?
We talk a lot about well-being, and well-being is a term I think that is, it's been a bit diluted over the past few years, I think. And I think there's lots of misunderstanding around well-being. So I'm always a bit apprehensive as a psychologist in my area of expertise to collect data around well-being. I think there is absolutely a place for that and it's necessary. But as an occupational psychologist, I prefer to look at what we call employee engagement, which is a very similar concept and very much related. So what employee engagement basically means is a psychological principle is that as business leaders, we can do certain things. And there's actually only 6 things that you can do to engage an employee in your business. And we've talked about some of those, giving them a clear reason, giving them a great role, the resources that they need, great relationships. There's only 6 things that we can do as business leaders to create an environment that is going to be engaging for our people. If we do that, then what that translates to is positive thoughts and feelings of the individual. So if I have a reason, I understand what my role in that mission delivery is, and I have a great relationships with my colleagues, I'm going to experience high job satisfaction. I'm going to feel committed to my organization. I'm going to behave in ways that go above and beyond my job role. I'm going to advocate for my organization. I'm going to be on LinkedIn shouting about how awesome my organization is. So it's going to impact my positive thoughts and feelings. Those positive thoughts and feelings directly impact our performance. So I will make my company more revenue. I will improve the profitability. My productivity will go up. I will be more innovative. We'll have faster speed to market. We'll grow quicker. Name a commercial metric If your employees experience positive engagement, that will be higher. And then the really cool thing is that as an individual, my outcomes are going to improve too. So my stress is going to be more manageable. I am going to feel very connected to my work. I'm going to feel that sense of purpose, which is going to mean that my well-being is better. It's going to mean that in terms of stress, I'm going to be able to manage it better. I'll be more resilient. I won't get physically sick as frequently. My immune system will be stronger because I'm engaged in my work. There is so much data that shows for an organization and an individual, engagement is the best thing we can do. So when you look at it like that in terms of the data, my thought is always collect the data that helps you understand how these foundations of culture, so these 6 aspects, how we're providing that as an organization, where we're doing well, where we're not, how that's translating into thoughts and feelings within our business, and how that's linked to outcomes. And through a survey like based on what we then call a predictive model of engagement, which is what I specialize in as an occupational psychologist, and most occupational psychologists do who work in this area, we can then track it through. So I always think as well with data, it's about making sure that business leaders have data that's useful, because otherwise data for data's sake, it's just annoying having to fill out a survey and then, nothing's done with it. And I've got all this data and I don't know what to do with it. If I've got this data from a predictive model of engagement, then I'm going to be able to see that, people are scoring our relationships a bit lower than we'd like them to be. And that means that, there's some people saying that they don't always feel safe to express their ideas. That'll be because, relationships are a bit shaky. Oh, and actually, in terms of our speed to market, that's decreased by 20% in the last 6 months. So we're able to follow the data through and go, okay, so if we invest in relationships, we start training our managers, start looking at how we can build cohesion within our team, then in 6 months' time, we should see an increase in how people feel about the relationships they have in the business, an increase in the levels of psychological safety they're feeling, and an increase in our ability to innovate at speed. And that's data, that's science, that's human behavior in the workplace in action. And for me, if every organization did that, and the worst thing is legally in the UK, you should be measuring the psychosocial factors within your business that could impact stress. That's just the HSC executive standard mandate. If you have 5 or more employees, doesn't happen. But if it did, not only you can have loads of cool data to really showcase yourself to the talent you want to bring into your business around well-being, about how people are thriving within your business. You're also going to have all the data that you need to feed directly into your operations strategy, as well as your people and culture strategy, probably even into your marketing and comms strategy. It's all one of the same. And I think that the sooner business leaders realize the opportunity they have in terms of collecting this really rich, useful data that will help them build their business, operations, frameworks, culture in a sustainable way that benefits their people and their profit, then we're going to crack the problems that we've been having in the past 50, 60 years. That's a solution. And it's a solution that has existed for decades. It's a solution that the government back in 2009 tried to push. And for whatever reason, it didn't quite get picked up. And I think because it doesn't sound sexy, employee engagement. If we talk about well-being, if we talk about mental health, if we talk about culture, it's exciting. Employee engagement doesn't quite have the same ring to it. But that's the opportunity in terms of data. That's how we bring it all together. And it might sound a little bit complicated. You might be going, I've not quite got those, pathways. I don't know what you mean there. Again, it's really simple. And this is where there's an opportunity for businesses to work with a psychologist, work with a behavioral scientist to collect this data that will actually be meaningful. And if you do want any more resource on that, I'm sure you'll put my details somewhere, and I will send you everything I can for free so you can really understand what you can do.
Of course, we'll definitely put that in the show notes. So yeah, there'll be loads of people that before this episode was thinking, well, I can't get the data to show it, so there's no point doing any interventions. You can, and it's all around that employee engagement. And you said it's such a huge opportunity. I'd say it's such a risk if you don't measure this kind of thing. And I'd seen a recent article in HR Director not so long ago, which was focusing on presenteeism which they described as the hidden productivity losses. And that is something that's really difficult to actually define and get your numbers on, isn't it? But I guess going back to this employee engagement data, that's a real indication, isn't it, of where presenteeism might be up to within the workplace.
Absolutely. And the survey that I use with my clients does measure for presenteeism as well. So you'll see that. And what can be really good about it is, and I think this is a frustration for business owners, and I think, practitioners like us, Anna, is that we see businesses spend large amounts of money on wellbeing interventions that aren't effective because they've not taken the time to understand the problem. And it's kind of like, any treatment isn't going to be effective if you haven't diagnosed the issue first. And that's what great data gathering can do. So you can really target that. And often it's really simple things. I was working with a client who was, they had a higher level of presenteeism than they would have liked. And they had a very committed, very engaged workforce. But there were some signs as well that people were starting to feel the drain, the energy drain, not a burnout, but early signs that, that energy levels are going down. So I said to him, I said, clearly you've got engaged people. They're so engaged that they want to come in when they're not feeling well enough, but that's starting to take its toll. What can we do about that? And they're like, oh, well, I guess we could put in this well-being thing. We do this, we do that, and do that. And I was like, can I just ask you a question? It's like, what percentage of your people take their full holiday allowance? And he was like, oh, maybe 60%. I was like, that's a really quick click of the finger you can do now. Just make sure your people take their full holiday allowance. That's their rest and recovery time that they're missing out on. And that's why they're coming into work when they're not feeling as well, or that's why their energy is going down, or it's something as simple as that. That doesn't even cost any money. You don't need to do anything new. You're just enforcing a policy that you've already put in place as a great benefit and perk to your people. And often with the right data, a lot of the interventions are tweaks like that, which means that when you do have the understanding of where you want to really target your well-being, your health interventions, you've got a really nice budget and a really clear idea of what you need, how it's going to help, and how you're also going to measure the impact of that in 6, 12 months' time, because you're going to collect your data again and you're going to be able to see that impact.
That's a super quick, powerful, easy to do, isn't it? Looking at the number of days off that people are taking. I love it. I also, in my workshops, will get people to get the phone out and put the EAP number in the telephone there and then, because I also feel that's a real missed opportunity that organisations are paying for EAP, which people see as counselling sessions, which actually I would say use them proactively. Don't wait till you get to that stage where you can't see the wood for the trees, where one, you don't even know what the telephone number was because you deleted the email ages ago because you were too busy to look at it. But also just see it as like life coaching, as being proactive and using it to help you through those hurdles in a proactive way. Because it's been paid for anyway. But again, that's getting that engagement, isn't it? And getting people to engage with what's available.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I think there's so much opportunity there, isn't there, for businesses to just leverage what they've already got in place. Don't do more, just do better with what you've got. And I think a big part of that for leaders is going to be modeling that behavior. It's going to be kind of saying that, I've been going through a bit of a stressful time, not with work, but we've got certain family things going on at the minute. So I used the EAP program. Oh my goodness, can't tell you how much better I felt after just that one conversation. I've got another session booked on Tuesday. We're going to talk a bit more around action planning, things like that. It's that type of, and it's showing your vulnerability, yes, but it's also showing that you're human and you're self-aware enough to know that I'm struggling. This help is in place. I accessed it, and now I'm going to share that experience to help other people feel psychologically safe to access that support.
Yeah, definitely. That is super powerful. And even going back to like different generations coming into the workplace, we know now that younger people value that, it's not just the paycheck that they're looking for. They're looking for health and well-being benefits. So, if older people in the organisation want to engage with those younger people, want to attract talent, they need to be creating that environment where, they do show that they're human and show that little bit of vulnerability.
Yeah. We actually undertook some research about 18 months ago in partnership with one of our clients looking at sentiment around health and well-being post-pandemic. And one of the findings that we got from particularly it was significant under 30s. It was a very big number, big percentage under 25s. Is that actually employees, when they're looking at organizations or evaluating how they feel about the environment they work in, they have an expectation of their leaders to invest in their own health and well-being. And that they're saying that they would work for an organization with the leader who invest in their health and well-being. They would leave an organization if their leaders didn't invest in their own health and well-being. So it's kind of that it's evolved even more now, that it's not just that young people joining our organizations want to be supporting their health and mental health. They want the authenticity of the culture, that the leaders model that behavior. And without that, they're less inclined to stay with that organization. And that for us was like, wow, that's a shift in sentiment in 5 years.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they've really got to walk the talk, haven't they? It can't just be lip surface and tick the box. Definitely not. I'm conscious that we've come into near a close and we haven't explored a couple of areas that I know you wanted to explore and I'm keen to ask you about as well. So you mentioned earlier on around AI and the impact on AI, and yeah, this is a big topic, isn't it, this year? There's mixed feelings around it, as you alluded to. Some people will be frightened about it. It could cause job insecurity. How do you think we can manage this? And also dipping into the area of DEI in terms of how can we embrace like differences and neurodiversity to complement and work with AI?
It's a big question. I think we're still working to understand a lot of those answers. There's certainly opportunity, isn't there? The more technology that comes in terms of AI and yeah, other emerging tech. I think what I'd start with is that in terms of the individual experience, because it will be different for everybody, but the commonality people are going to have is a question around, is AI coming for my job? And I spoke to about 15 experts in the last 3 months asking them that question. And the general consensus was AI isn't going to come for your job, but somebody who develops their own skills in how to use AI, they are. AI is a part of the world. AI is going to accelerate, whether it be, one of these things like cloud technology. I think it's going to change the world naturally, just integrates quite seamlessly. And we don't even think about cloud technology now, or whether it should be completely as disruptive as the internet was. You're going to have to build your skills in AI. You're going to have to lean into it. You're going to have to learn about it. And it's cool and frightening in equal measure from what I've used AI for. But yeah, it's here and it isn't going anywhere. So I think we need to lean in and develop skills in those areas. I think for business leaders, in terms of how to augment AI from a DEI lens, that's really tricky because again, we're not really getting DEI right as we are, and we're about to add this layer of complexity over it. So I think my feeling would again be, do a little audit of your organization in terms of where your DEI is at. And that's not about just having your policies in place. It's how is that operating within the organization? How is that reflected in your recruitment practices, in your evaluation practices, in your development practices, making sure that DEI really is in the fabric of your organization, because we need to do that work first before we then overcomplicate it further, potentially with emerging tech. And I think really it's working with any experts that you can afford when it just comes to that later stage. I think what's really exciting with emerging tech and DEI is how it could potentially help us provide safe working environments for people who, up until this point, we've not been able to do very successfully or on much of a scale. I was talking to a guy called Cody Green on the podcast, he has schizophrenia, and he's now in a very good place. He's medicated and has lots of different treatment plans in place, great support network. He still has schizophrenia, which means he still has hallucinations and delusional thoughts and the various other cognitive symptoms that come with that type of mental illness. And he was saying to me about how what's completely revolutionized his ability to work, and he does work very successfully, are the meta glasses, that kind of that you record, because he will record more discreetly when he's somewhere in public or at home, and he's not sure if he's having a hallucination or not. He can't distinguish whether that is a hallucination, that person sat in front of him. So he'll record with his meta glasses more discreetly. So he has to watch it back. Because if he watches the footage back and doesn't see that person, he knows it's a hallucination. If he does, he knows that it's part of his reality. And it's applications like that. I was like, wow, that's really quite cool because we're then kind of even progressing the conversation beyond neurodiversity, beyond mental health, and actually into how we can use emerging tech to support people with, pathological mental illnesses reintegrate effectively back into the workplace. And that is very cool.
That's really transformative, isn't it? And even that, that one simple device can just change his whole life, can't it? Because he can then be more effective in the workplace and feel more fulfilled and understand his purpose more. That, yeah, you have to give us a link then to put in the show notes as well to that one.
I will. He's an awesome content creator as well. He does lots of things on YouTube, and he's just written a book actually about reintegrating with into work with mental illness. Yeah, he's a really fascinating guy. So yeah, I'll send you all that.
Brilliant. Thank you, thank you. So so I guess what you're saying as well is that we've really got to understand the employees in the organisation and then really understand how we can leverage AI with different people, and understand how we can leverage specifically for that organisation.
Yeah,
Exactly,
it's a
but we
cliche,
need
isn't it?
clarity.
Yeah, exactly. It's a cliche, but it's like kind of, building on shaky foundations. So we're going to be a bit clunky and a bit, and there's a really great book actually. If you just, because I appreciate a lot of things I talk about, you're like, that sounds nice, Jan, but where am I going to get the resources for this as a small business owner? There's so much out there. There's an amazing book by an author called Catherine Garrett. It's called Conscious Inclusion by Catherine Garrett. And it's how to do EDI one decision at a time. She's also been on the show. She's incredible. Well, the way she's written this is basically it's a series of decisions that go from 1 to 50 something, and it's how you basically audit your organization for how it's currently doing in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's really simple things like do you think about DI as part of your recruitment process? Where do you advertise your jobs? If you only advertise them in the same places, then you're narrowing your talent pool. It's really simple. A lot of it's very operational, very process driven. So yeah, I'd say even just going through Catherine's book, going through the tools that she has in here and the audits would just give you an idea. And I think if you're missing more points than you're hitting, then there's probably some work to be done before we start to kind of add in that extra layer of complexity with emerging tech.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good checklist to create those foundations before you move on. Thank you. So, as I said, as we are coming to a close, 2 or 3 more questions. We're going to pick your brains on. I'm not letting you go till we've got them.
Fine.
Talking about amazing books, one that I've loved and lots of people, one of the most famous leadership books ever, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, which I think was probably the first leadership book I got really into and then sparked my fascination. One of his habits is around creating that win-win environment. How do you think we can create that win-win environment where organisations are thriving and employees are thriving as well?
I refer back to everything I said about employee engagement. I think that's a really good way to assess how win-win the current situation is. One of my favorite business books is by John Amici. And he talks about how one of the most important, if somebody's lost, one of the most important things you can do for them, the most valuable things you can do for them is tell them exactly where they are. And that's what a great employee engagement survey will do. It will help you evaluate how you're currently doing in that win-win situation. You might be smashing it already. You might be failing miserably, but you need to kind of know which one it is or how that's standing. So I think that's the first thing is really understand what is currently going on within your organization and how you're doing. It could be better than you think, it could be a bit worse than you think, but at least you'll know. And I think that the thing that's going to make a big difference in terms of this win-win is simply listening to your people and asking them, asking them like, how are we doing? Are we okay? Are we putting too much pressure on this? Is workloads unmanageable? How are you feeling? How are you, it's just having those conversations, whether it be formally through an employee engagement survey, whether it be informally with, your managers and their teams. It's really understanding current sentiment. And I think if you have even just the smallest amount of self-awareness and emotional intelligence as a leader, you're probably going to know how people are feeling, or you're going to know that you've got people off sick more than you've got them in, or that people are leaving, you've got a high turnover rate, you're struggling to get applications in. In terms of then creating the win-win, it takes a fundamental belief from the very top that you believe an organization can create a brilliant environment for their people where they thrive and your business makes money. Not every organization believes that, and not every organization will want to believe that. And we've seen lots of examples the last few years with the mass layoffs where lots of organizations are prioritizing profit over people. And that's okay. That's a commercial choice. But if you want to create that win-win scenario, if you fundamentally believe that philosophy, then make sure you know exactly how you're currently doing. Make sure you continue to bring people into that part of the conversation, and make sure that you have something in place to support people when and if they're struggling. Because we're also only human. And as a business owner, there's only so much you can do. There's only so much within your locus of control in terms of creating this environment. Even if you do everything right, people are still going to have influences from beyond work, whether it be with their relationships, their loved ones, their health. There could be a whole host of other things that are going to impact their well-being, their financial situation. It's making sure there's support mechanisms in place. So when people are struggling, you know what to do, you know how to support them, and you know how to rebuild them as soon as possible. Because again, in terms of that win-win, what you're going to get in that moment when somebody is struggling and as an organization going, this is how we're going to help, then you have my trust, you have my respect. I'm more committed because I'm amazed that my work wants to help me through this in a scenario that isn't necessarily work related. So that when I am rehabilitated, when I am back to my peak performance, I'm more committed, I'm more productive, I'm going the extra mile. I'm advocating all these positive thoughts and behaviors that we talked about. So I think it's really having those things in place. And I think a really obvious or a really great starting point for that. And again, we spoke to a guest called Marie on the show just before Christmas, is around grief. How do you manage grief with your people if they lose a loved one, a family member? Marie actually lost her child, and it was how her workplace supported her with that awful trauma. Having some of those things in place, having the answers before that point of crisis is really going to be helpful to people if and when they experience that. So I think that's the thing, is looking at from kind of a business as usual perspective, how do we create this environment that's win-win? From a crisis perspective, how do we put these mechanisms of support in place so we continue to create this win-win environment? But fundamentally, you and every member of your senior leadership team needs to believe in this philosophy. And if you don't, you'll probably spend a lot of money trying to create these win-win scenarios without much impact or success. It really starts at the top.
Thank you. That was really useful. Everything you've said then, I think, completely makes sense. And like I said, it's got to be led by the top, and being proactive, making sure people know what's available in the event of things happening, gives them that comfort that they know that the company is there for them. And like you said, these things have a legacy, don't they? People remember the support that you've given them when they needed it, and they will give back to the organisation. So your investment now will have a legacy for a long, long time.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Leanne. My final question is going to be, your podcast is Truth, Work and Lies. What are some of the biggest lies that you're currently seeing in the workplace right now?
Oh, there's so many. So many. The RTO, return to office mandates, we've already talked about, complete nonsense. Yeah. This whole resurgence of very traditional, toxic, masculine leader behaviors, that is what we need to drive change, is nonsense. Quiet quitting. If I could ban one term from the world of work, it would be quiet quitting, because quiet quitting isn't new. Quiet quitting has been around for decades. Quiet quitting is what happens when people are disengaged from their work. And what frustrates me about the term quiet quitting is it's putting the blame on the people who are disengaged, because the organization can't be bothered to create an environment in which people are engaged, where they do have meaningful work, where they do want to be. So they're scapegoating the millennials and the Gen Z as lazy and snowflakes and whatever else for quiet quitting. And then also the thing that annoys me about quiet quitting is that there's this outrage about people just doing the work that they're contracted and paid to do. How have we got to a world where that's outrageous, where people are paid to do the work they're contracted to do? And if they don't want to do more, that's shameful. Shame on them. They're quiet quitting. And it's this whole mindset that really frustrates me. And that's the biggest lie, that wherever you want to dress it up as, whether it's leadership behaviors, whether it's quiet quitting, whether it's RTO mandates, the biggest lie is that for work to function, there needs to be one person who has all the power and control and the rest of us. And that's nonsense. Because the best organizations, the most successful organizations, the healthiest organizations are where everybody feels that sense of control, autonomy, purpose, meaning. That's what creates a great environment. That's what creates a great business. So that is the biggest lie.
Thank you. And like you said about people just doing what's in the contracts and being frowned upon, those kind of behaviors could lead to burnout by expecting more from people. And have the consequences. And I think around that quiet quitters, I've been guilty of using this phrase, but from a perspective, which I think you've just explained there, is that organisations are not engaging those people, so they're becoming disengaged. And I think it probably is a phrase, isn't it, that's misunderstood a little bit. So thank you for shedding some light on those live out there. Leanne, it's been amazing to speak with you. You've given us so much insight, knowledge, motivation, and got us fired up to make a change. Where can people find more about you? How can they get in touch with you? And is there anything that you want to leave us with? Any words of wisdom?
If you want to find me, LinkedIn is probably where I'm the most active. Leanne Elliott. We have a website, so anything I've mentioned around employee engagement and the survey side of it, our consultancy is called Oblong HQ. You'll find us at oblonghq.com, and through that you can book in a free 1-hour consultation with me to talk about all of that stuff. Truth, Lies and Work is the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're also on YouTube. We're a video podcast as well. And I think any words of wisdom, I don't know. I've said a lot. I'm not sure there's much wisdom in most of it. But I think my thought would be, there's lots of people in the current climate who are feeling really apprehensive, really, really unsure, really anxious about the future. And it's, yeah, I'm not sure the first half of this year much is going to happen to alleviate that anxiety. What I would say is that just remember what I said about the one thing we know has the biggest impact on our happiness, our health, our longevity, our work, relationships. If you invest in one thing, and particularly if you're feeling a bit down and anxious, and that's the time where we start to withdraw, make sure you invest in those relationships where you can. Get that date in the diary to see that friend you haven't seen in ages. Have that date night with your partner on Saturday that we always, well, I do anyway, after 13 years of marriage, it always gets pushed. So have that date night in the diary and make sure you go. Invest in that, because this is what's going to really impact our mental health, our well-being, and our resilience. And I think that's what we're going to need in the next 12 months, is that resilience.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Leanne, for your time. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me.
So before you stop listening, I want you to pause. What did you take away from the podcast today? What small steps will you start? And what did you hear that you know could help someone else to make small steps to link their health, well-being, productivity and performance? Please do share this episode and please subscribe to the podcast. And remember that Leap Health are here to provide workplace health, wellbeing and performance workshops, one-to-one coaching and bespoke corporate solutions to help the world make small steps to leap health, wellbeing, productivity and performance. Please do get in touch. It's Anna at leaphealth.co.uk. Have a great day.